After losing a billion-dollar deal due to cultural missteps, an Arab businessman crosses paths with a girl who speaks classical Arabic with remarkable fluency. When she reveals that her father is about to be fired for not speaking English, she asks, firmly yet gently, that he be spared. Confronted with such pure courage, the businessman realizes that the true bridge between cultures is not born of power, but of compassion. Chapter 1. The Unexpected Encounter. The imposing glass tower of Reynolds International stood like a beacon against the Manhattan skyline, its sleek exterior reflecting the fading October sunset. Inside the 47th floor conference room, tension crackled in the air like static electricity. Mason Reynolds, CEO and heir to the Reynolds fortune, stared in disbelief as the Chinese investors gathered their documents and rose from their seats. "Mr. Zhao, please reconsider," Mason said, his voice strained with desperation. "This partnership would revolutionize sustainable energy across Asia." Li Zhao, head of the investment consortium, simply adjusted his tie. "Mr. Reynolds, we have great respect for your vision, but after 3 meetings it seems our communication styles are incompatible. Your team doesn't understand our approach to business relationships." Mason's executive assistant, Vanessa Mitchell, stepped forward with a folder. "Perhaps if we reviewed the projections once more." "Numbers are not the issue," Mr. Zhao interrupted, his English precise and measured. "Trust comes before contracts. Your people speak to us like machines, not human beings." Diane Blackwell, head of HR, whispered something to CFO Greg Patterson, who shook his head dismissively. The subtle exchange wasn't lost on the Chinese delegation, whose expressions hardened further. "We will take our investment elsewhere," Mr. Zhao concluded. "Perhaps to competitors who value cultural understanding." With that, $5 billion walked out the door, leaving Mason standing amid the debris of his biggest career failure. The moment the elevator doors closed behind the investors, the blame game erupted. "Their demands were unreasonable," Greg insisted, loosening his tie. "We can't restructure our entire approach for one client." "They're old-fashioned," Diane added. "All this talk about relationship building is just delaying." "Tactics!" Mason slammed his palm against the conference table, silencing the room. "We just lost the biggest deal of the decade because none of you bothered to understand how they do business in China." His voice echoed off the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I need air. Don't follow me." He stormed out, ignoring Vanessa's concerned call. The executive elevator whisked him down to the lobby, his mind racing with calculations of how much shareholder value had evaporated in the last hour. 20 years building Reynolds International from his father's modest engineering firm to a global powerhouse, and now this colossal failure threatened everything. The lobby was nearly empty as the workday ended. Mason loosened his tie, considering whether to call his driver or walk home to clear his head. That's when he heard it, a child's laughter, bright and innocent, cutting through his dark thoughts. Instinctively, he turned toward the sound. Near the security desk sat a little girl, no more than 7 years old, with golden brown hair pulled into neat pigtails. She wore a simple blue dress and scuffed sneakers, her legs swinging freely as she watched something on a tablet. What caught Mason's attention wasn't her presence, but what emanated from her device, a Chinese cartoon with characters speaking, rapid Mandarin. Curiosity momentarily displaced his frustration. Mason approached, intending only to pass by for a closer look when the security guard noticed him. "Evening, Mr. Reynolds," said the guard, straightening immediately. The little girl looked up, her hazel eyes widening slightly at the sight of the tall man in the expensive suit. But instead of shying away, she paused her video and smiled. "Hello," Mason said automatically, the courtesy ingrained after years of business etiquette. To his astonishment, the child responded in perfect Mandarin, "Nin hao, Reynolds Qiansheng." Her pronunciation was flawless, her tone confident but respectful. Mason stopped in his tracks. He'd spent years struggling with Mandarin lessons, and this child spoke with a natural fluency he'd never achieved. Switching to Mandarin himself, he replied with considerably more effort, "You speak Chinese very well. What's your name?" "Emma Thompson," she replied, still in impeccable Mandarin. "My daddy works here. He cleans the offices upstairs." She pointed vaguely toward the ceiling. Are you sad? You look sad. The directness of children never ceased to amaze Mason. He found himself answering honestly, "Yes, I had a difficult meeting." "With the Chinese people?" Emma asked, surprising him again. "I saw them leave. They didn't look happy either." Before Mason could respond, a man in a grey maintenance uniform hurried into the lobby. "Emma, sorry I'm late, sweetie. The 38th floor had a—" He froze when he saw who his daughter was talking to. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm sorry if she's bothering you, sir." "She's not bothering me at all," Mason said, switching back to English. "Your daughter speaks incredible Mandarin." The man, David Thompson according to his name badge, looked simultaneously proud and embarrassed. "Yeah, she's got a gift for languages. Picks them up like they're nothing." He placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "We should get going, sir. Don't want to hold you up." "Actually," Mason found himself saying, "I'd like to talk with both of you for a moment, if you don't mind." David's expression shifted to concern. Mason realized how unusual this request must seem. A company CEO asking to speak with a maintenance worker and his child. But something about this encounter felt significant, like stumbling upon a rare element when you weren't even prospecting. "Maybe we could get some ice cream in the cafe," Mason suggested, noticing Emma's eyes light up. "My treat, of course." 5 minutes later, the unlikely trio sat in the otherwise empty building cafe. Emma licked her chocolate cone while Mason learned that she had taught herself Mandarin by watching cartoons, then received guidance from Dr. Lily Chen, a linguistics professor who volunteered at Emma's school. "She learned because of me," David explained quietly. "Foreign visitors are always getting lost in the building, asking for directions. I couldn't help them." His eyes lowered briefly. Emma noticed how frustrated they got, especially the Chinese business people, so she decided to learn their language. "I just wanted to help," Emma said simply, chocolate smeared on her upper lip. "People get scared when they can't talk to anybody. It's like being invisible." Her words hit Mason with unexpected force. Invisible. Wasn't that exactly how the Chinese investors had felt during those sterile, number-focused meetings? "How many languages do you speak now, Emma?" Mason asked. 4, she answered matter-of-factly. "English, Spanish, Mandarin, and I'm learning Arabic because the new security guard, Mr. Saeed, sometimes looks lonely." David checked his watch nervously. "Emma, we should really go. Your mum will be wondering where we are." "Of course," Mason said, standing. "Thank you for the conversation. It was illuminating." As they prepared to leave, Emma turned to Mason with the unfiltered honesty only children possess. "My daddy might not be here tomorrow. Ms. Blackwell said he has to go because he doesn't speak Chinese or know computers." David's face flushed, with embarrassment and something else, fear. "Emma, that's grown-up business. Mr. Reynolds doesn't need to hear about that." But Mason had already heard enough. The pieces fell into place with perfect clarity. Diane's workforce optimization initiative suddenly had a human face. This hard-working father, whose daughter possessed exactly the skills his company desperately needed. "David, would you mind coming to my office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.? The maintenance worker's expressions cycled through surprise, confusion, and worry. "Sir, if this is about what Emma said—" "It's about several things," Mason interrupted. "All of them important." He handed David his personal business card. "Please don't be late." As he watched them leave, Mason felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose beyond quarterly reports and shareholder value. The irony wasn't lost on him. Hours after losing a deal worth billions because his team couldn't communicate effectively, he'd discovered a remarkable linguistic talent in the most unexpected place. He pulled out his phone and made 2 calls. The first to his assistant, "Vanessa, cancel my morning meetings tomorrow and find everything we have on David Thompson in maintenance, and contact Dr. Lily Chen at Columbia University's Linguistics Department." The second call was to Diane Blackwell. "Diane, about that staff reduction plan you presented last week, we need to talk, first thing tomorrow." As Mason finally left the building, the weight of the failed deal still pressed upon him, but alongside it grew something new, a fragile, tentative hope that perhaps he'd found not just a solution to his immediate business problem, but something far more valuable. Chapter 2. Bridges of Understanding. Mason arrived at his office earlier than usual the next morning. The city was still waking up, street vendors setting up their carts as yellow taxis weaved through the growing traffic. He found himself wondering how David Thompson commuted to work each day, whether he took the crowded subway or sacrificed precious income for the convenience of driving. "You're early," Vanessa remarked, appearing with his usual black coffee. Her efficiency had kept Reynolds International functioning through countless crises. "I have David Thompson's file. Not much there. Hired 3 years ago. Satisfactory performance reviews. Widower raising a daughter on his own." Mason accepted both the coffee and the thin folder. "Widower? I didn't know that. Emma's mother died when she was 4. Leukemia." Vanessa's expression softened. "Apparently Thompson has never missed a day of work, even during his wife's illness." The revelation added another dimension to the situation. Mason scanned the file, noting David's previous employment, maintenance, positions at other corporate buildings, a stint in construction, military service before that. Nothing in his background suggested how his daughter had developed such extraordinary linguistic abilities. "Dr. Chen is coming at 10, Vanessa added. "And Diane is already here, pacing like a caged tiger outside your office." "Let her pace," Mason replied. "What about the Chinese delegation? Any word?" "They're scheduled to fly back to Beijing this afternoon. Mr. Zhao hasn't responded to our messages." Mason nodded, already formulating a plan. At precisely 9 a.m. his intercom buzzed. "David Thompson is here, sir." "Send him in." David entered cautiously, wearing the same grey uniform as yesterday but freshly pressed. His weathered hands revealed years of manual labor, contrasting with Mason's manicured appearance. "Please sit down," Mason gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "Coffee?" "No, thank you, sir." David perched on the edge of the chair, clearly uncomfortable in the CEO's spacious office with its panoramic views of the city. "I've been reviewing your employment history," Mason began, setting aside the folder. "You've been with us 3 years." "Yes, sir. I started in the loading dock, then moved to maintenance. And before that? Army. 10 years, then construction until my back couldn't take it anymore. Maintenance work is steadier." David's eyes darted around the office. "Mr. Reynolds, about what Emma said yesterday," Mason raised a hand. "Let's talk about Emma first. Her language abilities are remarkable. How did that start?" The question seemed to surprise David, who relaxed slightly. "It was after Sarah, my wife, passed. Emma stopped talking for almost 6 months. The therapist suggested finding activities that might engage her." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "One day I was cleaning the apartment and put on some cartoon for her. It happened to be in Spanish. When I came back, she was repeating phrases from the show. So you encouraged it?" "I couldn't afford much, but I got her a tablet and downloaded language learning apps. She took off from there." Pride momentarily overcame his nervousness. By the time she started school, she was already bilingual. When the school realized her talent, they connected us with Dr. Chen's community program for gifted kids. Mason leaned forward. "And the Mandarin?" "That started here, actually. Emma sometimes comes to work with me when her after-school program is closed. She noticed Chinese visitors struggling to communicate with the staff. One day, she just decided she was going to learn Chinese to help them." David shook his head, in wonder. "Dr. Chen says she has something called hyperpolyglottism, a rare ability to acquire languages rapidly." The office door opened without warning, and Diane Blackwell strode in, her expression a mixture of impatience and confusion. "Mason, we need to discuss the quarterly staffing adjustments before—" She stopped abruptly upon seeing David. "I didn't realize you were in a meeting." "I am," Mason replied evenly. "With Mr. Thompson, please join us, Diane. It concerns your department." Diane's professional smile didn't reach her eyes as she took the seat beside David, who had stiffened at her entrance. "Mr. Thompson, I understand you're on the list for termination in next week's reduction," Mason said directly. David's shoulders slumped, but he maintained his dignity. "Ah, yes, sir," Ms. Blackwell informed me yesterday that my position is being eliminated as part of digital transformation. They're installing automated systems that require technical knowledge I don't have." "That's correct," Diane interjected smoothly. "The janitorial staff is being reduced by 30% as we implement smart building technology. Mr. Thompson lacks the technical skills and language proficiency required for our evolving workplace. We're offering a generous severance package. 2 weeks' pay," David clarified quietly. Mason studied Diane, this woman who had been his trusted HR director for 8 years. Had she always been this coldly efficient, or had the corporate world gradually stripped away her empathy? "Diane, would you say that communication is important to our company?" She blinked at the apparent non sequitur. Of course, clear communication is essential to any enterprise. "And would you agree that we just lost a $5 billion deal because of communication failures?" Her posture stiffened. That situation was complex. "It was entirely about communication," Mason cut in, "and here we are about to terminate an employee whose 7-year-old daughter speaks better Mandarin than anyone on our executive team." David looked up in surprise. Diane's expression wavered between confusion and annoyance. "Mason, with all due respect, what does his daughter have to do with company policy?" "Everything." Mason turned to David. "Where is Emma today?" "At school, sir. She has a half day, so my neighbor is watching her until my shift ends." Mason checked his watch. "Could she be here by noon? With your permission, of course." David hesitated. "I suppose so, but why?" "Because I'm offering both of you jobs." Mason enjoyed the look of shock that spread across Diane's face. "David, instead of termination, I'm proposing we reassign you. Full benefits, better hours, and company-sponsored English to Mandarin classes." "I don't understand," David said cautiously. "And for Emma, a position as our youngest ever cultural consultant, part-time, of course, working with our international relations team after school, with proper compensation placed in a trust fund for her education." Diane recovered her voice. "Mason, this is highly irregular. The child labor implications alone will be handled through an educational internship structure," Mason countered. "Dr. Chen is coming in shortly to help us design it properly." David shook his head in disbelief. "Sir, I'm grateful, but why would you do this?" Mason leaned back in his chair, considering how much to reveal. 25 years ago, I was a freshman at NYU, working nights as a dishwasher to supplement my scholarship. The head chef, an immigrant who barely spoke English, noticed I was falling asleep between shifts. Instead of firing me, he rearranged the schedule to accommodate my classes and taught me restaurant Spanish in exchange for help with his English citizenship exam. The memory surfaced with unexpected clarity. The steamy kitchen, his aching back, Chef Ramirez's patient corrections of his pronunciation. That man changed my life by seeing potential where others saw a liability. I've always believed in returning the favor when opportunity presents itself." Mason stood up. "Diane, please stay. David, Vanessa will show you to the conference room where Dr. Chen will meet you to discuss logistics." As David left, visibly stunned by this turn of events, Diane remained seated, her expression carefully controlled. "Mason, while your personal story is touching, this decision undermines the entire workforce optimization strategy. The board expects us to cut operational costs by 15% this quarter. The board expects us to secure the Chinese partnership too, which we've failed to do," Mason replied sharply. "Do you know what it would cost to hire a team of cultural consultants and translators to salvage this deal? Far more than David. Thompson's salary and his daughter's trust fund." Diane crossed her legs, shifting tactics. "And how exactly do you envision a 7-year-old helping with a multi-billion-dollar negotiation?" "That's what we're going to find out," Mason's intercom buzzed, announcing Dr. Chen's arrival. "But first, I want you to hear something." He played a video on his phone, footage from the building's security camera showing Emma conversing fluently in Mandarin with a lost visitor the previous week. The child's natural diplomacy was evident even without understanding the language. She had not only translated directions, but had walked the visitor to the elevator, bowing slightly as they parted. "This level of cultural fluency takes most adults years to develop," Mason said. Emma does it instinctively. Diane watched with reluctant interest. It's impressive, I admit, but children are unpredictable. Bringing her into a high-stakes business environment is risky. Sometimes the biggest risks yield the greatest rewards. Mason pocketed his phone. Now shall we meet Dr. Chen? I believe she has some insights about how other companies have utilized gifted children as cultural bridges. As they walked toward the conference room, Diane asked quietly, "What happens if this unconventional approach fails? If we lose the Chinese deal despite these efforts?" Mason stopped, turning to face his HR director. "Then I'll have done something worthwhile anyway. David keeps his job, Emma gets an educational opportunity, and maybe, just maybe, this company remembers there are human beings behind every spreadsheet entry." For the first time that morning, Diane's expression softened. "You've changed, Mason. A year ago, you would have prioritized the bottom line without hesitation." "Perhaps I'm remembering what matters," he replied, pushing open the conference room door where Dr. Lily Chen waited beside David Thompson, both watching as Emma explored the room with the unabashed curiosity of childhood. The little girl spotted Mason and smiled with genuine warmth. "Hello, Mr. Reynolds. Daddy says you have an important job for us. Is it about the sad Chinese people from yesterday?" Mason felt something shift inside him, a certainty that regardless of the outcome, this decision was right. "Yes, Emma. It's about helping people understand each other better. Would you like to try?" "I would," she answered without hesitation. Because when people understand each other, they're not afraid anymore. From the simplicity of a child's wisdom, Mason glimpsed the solution that had eluded his highly paid executives for months. Chapter 3. The Intervention. Dr. Lily Chen was not what Mason had expected. In her early 40s, with short, practical hair and no-nonsense glasses, she carried herself with the confident efficiency of someone who had learned to navigate both academic and bureaucratic worlds. When she spoke, her words were measured and precise, her accent a blend of her Beijing origins and decades in American universities. "Emma's linguistic abilities are extraordinary," she explained as they settled around the conference table. "What makes her truly special isn't just language acquisition, but cultural intuition. She naturally grasps the unspoken rules and emotional contexts that even advanced adult learners struggle with." Emma sat quietly beside her father, swinging her legs and drawing on a notepad Vanessa had provided. Though appearing absorbed in her artwork, Mason noticed how her eyes darted up periodically, missing nothing of the adult conversation. "In my 20 years of research, I've encountered only 3 children with her level of ability," Dr. Chen continued. "One is now a United Nations translator. Another works in diplomatic services." "And you believe Emma could help with our current situation?" Mason asked. Dr. Chen glanced at the child with obvious affection. "Emma, would you like to explain what we've been practicing?" The girl looked up, suddenly professional despite her pigtails and sparkly barrette. "Business Chinese is different from regular Chinese," she stated matter-of-factly. "In America, business people say what they want right away. In China, they build relationships first. They don't like when you rush or only talk about money." Diane raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the child's insight. "Emma has been helping international students navigate American customs," Dr. Chen explained, "and in return they teach her the nuances of their cultures. It's a remarkable exchange program." David watched his daughter with quiet pride, though his posture remained tense. This world of executive decisions and corporate strategies was clearly foreign territory. "How would this work practically?" Diane asked, her tone more curious than resistant now. "We can't simply bring a child into high-level negotiations." "Actually," Dr. Chen replied, "there's precedent for young cultural ambassadors in international business. The Richardson-Liu Agreement of 2018 was facilitated by the CEO's 12-year-old son, who had grown up bilingual. The Nakamura Corporation regularly involves gifted children in cultural exchange programs before major negotiations." Mason tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the table. "The Chinese delegation leaves today. We need to act quickly if we're going to salvage this partnership. I've already taken the liberty, Vanessa interjected from the doorway, of contacting Mr. Zhao's assistant. They've delayed their departure until tomorrow morning pending your urgent communication. Mason smiled gratefully at his ever-efficient assistant. Thank you, Vanessa. Now we need a strategy. He turned to Emma, softening his tone. Emma, would you be willing to help us talk to the Chinese business people? They're very important to our company, but we haven't been very good at understanding them. Emma set down her crayon. Is that why they were angry yesterday, because you don't understand them? Exactly, Mason admitted. We've been speaking different languages, even when we're all speaking English. The child considered this with surprising seriousness. I can help, but you have to promise something first. What's that? Emma glanced at her father, then back to Mason. You have to tell everyone that my daddy gets to stay. Not just you and Ms. Blackwell, but everybody, so nobody can change their mind later. The room fell silent. The political acumen in this simple request would have impressed Mason, coming from a seasoned negotiator, let alone a 7-year-old. David looked mortified. Emma, you can't make demands of Mr. Reynolds. It's a fair condition, Mason interrupted, meeting Emma's steady gaze. You want public accountability. Smart. Emma nodded solemnly. Dr. Chen says that when promises are made in front of witnesses, they're harder to break. Mason felt a smile tugging at his lips. This child was teaching him negotiation tactics. I agree to your terms, Emma Thompson. In fact, I'll do one better. We'll announce both your father's new position and your special role at this afternoon's company meeting. Diane shifted uncomfortably. Mason, perhaps we should discuss the details more thoroughly before making public announcements. No, he said firmly. Emma's right. Public commitments are harder to reverse, and that applies to me as well. Dr. Chen beamed with obvious pride at her young protege. Emma has excellent instincts about power dynamics. The conversation shifted to logistics, how to approach the Chinese delegation, what role Emma might play, how to structure the interaction appropriately for a child her age. Throughout the discussion, Mason found himself repeatedly impressed by Emma's composure and insight. When Dr. Chen left for her afternoon lecture, promising to return later, and Vanessa took Emma to the cafeteria for lunch, Mason finally had a moment alone with David and Diane. I know this is unorthodox, he acknowledged, but sometimes unorthodox problems require unorthodox solutions. David leaned forward, his expression serious. Mr. Reynolds, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I need to be sure Emma won't be exploited or put in an uncomfortable position. She's just a child. A valid concern, Mason agreed, which is why Dr. Chen will oversee every aspect of her involvement, and you'll be present throughout. This isn't about using your daughter. It's about creating an opportunity for cultural bridge building that benefits everyone, including Emma. Diane, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. I have to admit the child's abilities are remarkable, but David raises a good point about exploitation. The optics could be problematic. Only if we approach this cynically, Mason countered. If we're transparent about Emma's role as a cultural consultant and ensure proper compensation and educational benefits, we transform this from exploitation to opportunity. The office intercom buzzed, and Vanessa's voice came through. Mason, Greg Patterson and the executive team are demanding an emergency meeting about the Chinese delegation. They've heard rumors. Mason sighed. News traveled fast in corporate corridors. Tell them 1 hour, main conference room. He turned back to David. This may get complicated. Corporate politics can be ugly. I know something about politics, sir, David replied with unexpected firmness. 10 years in the military teaches you plenty about chain of command and power struggles. Mason reassessed the man before him. Perhaps he'd underestimated David Thompson, seeing only the maintenance uniform and not the intelligence and experience behind it. Fair point. Would you be comfortable attending this meeting? These executives can be intimidating. With all due respect, Mr. Reynolds, I've faced insurgent fire in Afghanistan. Your executives don't scare me. A hint of steel showed beneath David's humble exterior. What does concern me is protecting Emma. As it should, Mason agreed, feeling a growing respect for this father's priorities. Let's set some ground rules, then. Emma's welfare comes first. Her involvement is limited to appropriate interactions. Dr. Chen has final say on anything involving Emma's participation, and you have veto power if anything makes you uncomfortable. David considered this, then nodded. Those terms are acceptable. Diane looked between the two men, a calculating expression on her face. Mason, the board will question this unorthodox approach. They'll want metrics, projections, risk assessments. Then we'll give them what they always want, numbers, Mason replied. Calculate the cost of losing the Chinese deal versus the investment in our new cultural initiative. Frame it as an innovative approach to international relations that positions Reynolds International as a forward-thinking company. That's your specialty, isn't it, Diane? Making difficult decisions palatable to the board. A subtle shift occurred in Diane's demeanor. The faint recognition that she was being challenged to rise above mere cost-cutting to something more creative. I'll prepare the presentation, she said finally. But I want it on record that I've expressed concerns about involving a minor in corporate negotiations. Duly noted, Mason agreed. Now let's prepare for the executive team. They won't be easily convinced. When Emma returned from lunch, her face brightened with chocolate ice cream. Mason was struck again by the incongruity of the situation. This child, with her innocent enthusiasm and remarkable gifts, was about to be thrust into the cutthroat world of corporate politics. Was he making a terrible mistake? As if sensing his doubt, Emma approached his chair. Mr. Reynolds, are the other important people going to be mad about me helping? Mason considered lying, then thought better of it. Some of them might be. Emma, they're used to doing things a certain way. She nodded thoughtfully. That's okay. Dr. Chen says people get scared when things change, even grown-ups. Especially grown-ups. That's very wise, Mason replied, surprised by her perception. My mom used to say that too, Emma added quietly. Before she went to heaven, she said people who are scared are the loudest ones in the room. David's expression softened at the mention of his late wife. She was right about that, sweetheart. Mason felt a tightness in his chest. This child had already faced greater loss than many adults, yet maintained such emotional intelligence and resilience. Suddenly, the prospect of facing his resistant executive team seemed trivial in comparison. As 1 o'clock approached, the tension in Mason's office grew palpable. Vanessa appeared at the door, her expression concerned. They're all here. Greg has already questioned why the maintenance worker and his daughter are in the building without an assignment. Mason straightened his tie and stood. Then, let's not keep them waiting. It's time they learned that sometimes wisdom comes from unexpected places. David rose beside him, squaring his shoulders with military precision. Emma slipped her small hand into her father's, a gesture of both seeking and offering strength. Together, this unlikely trio headed toward the conference room, where the executive team of Reynolds International waited with mounting impatience. As they walked, Mason realized that whatever the outcome of this confrontation, something fundamental had already changed. His perception of what truly mattered in business and in life. Ready? He asked his companions as they paused outside the conference room doors. Ready, David confirmed with quiet dignity. Emma nodded, her expression suddenly solemn. Don't worry, Mr. Reynolds. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the one everyone needs to hear. With that profound observation hanging in the air, Mason pushed open the doors to face whatever came next. Chapter 4. The Challenge, the Fee. Conference room fell silent as Mason entered with David and Emma. 8 pairs of eyes locked onto the unlikely trio, particularly the child whose head barely cleared the edge of the massive mahogany table. Greg Patterson, the CFO, didn't bother to hide his irritation. Mason, what is the meaning of this? We're facing a corporate crisis and you're bringing in visitors. His emphasis on the last word made it clear he considered their presence inappropriate. Mason remained standing, gesturing for David and Emma to take seats near the door. These aren't visitors, Greg. This is David Thompson, who's being promoted to our new Cultural Facilities Coordinator, and his daughter Emma, who will be joining us as a special cultural consultant for the Chinese negotiations. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Director of Operations Jeffrey Winters choked on his water. Marketing VP Carolyn Hughes exchanged incredulous glances with legal counsel Robert Stein. Only Vanessa, standing quietly in the corner taking notes, maintained her professional composure. "Is this some kind of joke?" Greg finally sputtered. "I've never been more serious," Mason replied evenly. "Yesterday we lost a $5 billion deal because our approach to the Chinese delegation was culturally tone-deaf. Today, we have an opportunity to correct that mistake, thanks to some unexpected expertise." He nodded toward Emma, who sat quietly beside her father, her small hands folded on the table. She appeared remarkably composed despite the tension in the room. Greg's face flushed with anger. "Mason, with all due respect, this is absurd. We can't bring a child into high-level international negotiations. The liability alone is being handled by legal," Mason interrupted. "Robert's team is drafting the appropriate documentation as we speak. Isn't that right, Robert?" The company lawyer cleared his throat, caught off guard. "Ah, yes. Ms. Blackwell briefed me earlier. We're creating a specialized educational consultancy agreement with proper parental consent clauses and—" "The point," Greg cut in, "is that this is completely unprofessional. What will the Chinese delegation think if we bring a child to the table? They'll assume we're not taking them seriously." Emma's voice, small but clear, broke through the tension. "Excuse me, Mr. Patterson, but in Chinese culture, children are very respected. They believe children represent hope and future possibilities." She spoke without a trace of nervousness. "When important visitors come to Chinese schools, the children always present gifts and perform welcomes. It's considered a great honor." The room fell silent again, this time from surprise. The child had just delivered a cultural insight that none of them had considered in perfectly articulated terms. Mason couldn't suppress a smile. "Emma speaks fluent Mandarin, among other languages. She's been working with Dr. Lily Chen from Columbia University's Linguistics Department as part of a program for gifted children." "That's impressive," Carolyn admitted, her marketing instincts clearly sensing an angle. "But how exactly would this work? We can't have a 7-year-old leading negotiations." "Of course not," Mason agreed. "But Emma can help us understand where we went wrong and how to approach the delegation more effectively. Dr. Chen will be joining us shortly to outline the framework." Jeffrey Winters, always the pragmatist, leaned forward. "Let's assume for a moment this unconventional approach has merit. What's our timeline? The Chinese are leaving tomorrow." "I've arranged a dinner meeting tonight at the garden," Vanessa interjected. "Mr. Zhao has tentatively agreed pending confirmation of our new approach." David, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "Emma has already helped dozens of Chinese visitors navigate this building. She understands their frustrations and expectations better than most adults." Greg scoffed. "With all due respect, Mr. Thompson, building directions are hardly the same as a multi-billion-dollar negotiation." "With all due respect, Mr. Patterson," David replied evenly, "understanding people is understanding people, regardless of the dollar amount involved." An uncomfortable silence followed this exchange. Mason was impressed by David's quiet dignity in the face of corporate condescension. Before anyone could respond, the conference room door opened and Dr. Chen entered, carrying a sleek leather portfolio. "I apologize for my tardiness," she said, her presence immediately commanding attention. "Ooh, university politics delayed me. I see we're discussing Emma's role in your negotiations." Mason performed quick introductions before Dr. Chen opened her portfolio and distributed several research papers. "These are case studies of successful, cross-cultural business negotiations involving young cultural ambassadors," she explained. "The Nakamura-Boeing Partnership, the Swiss-Indonesian Agricultural Treaty, and the Silicon Valley-Shenzhen Technology Corridor all utilized gifted children as cultural bridges." Robert Stein flipped through the documents with interest. "These are legitimate precedents. From a legal standpoint, this could actually work if properly structured. The question isn't, can we do this, but should we?" Greg insisted. We're risking the company's reputation on a Hail Mary pass. As opposed to what? Mason countered. The deal is already lost. Traditional approaches have failed. What exactly do we have to lose by trying something innovative? Carolyn Hughes, ever the marketing strategist, had been studying Emma thoughtfully. Actually, there could be significant PR value here. Reynolds International pioneers innovative cultural exchange program. We could frame this as forward-thinking corporate, social responsibility. That's precisely the cynical exploitation I want to avoid, Mason said firmly. This isn't a publicity stunt. It's a genuine attempt to bridge a cultural gap using the most qualified person available, who happens to be 7 years old. Emma had been quietly drawing on a notepad during this discussion. Now she slid the paper toward the center of the table. On it was a simple but striking image, a bridge connecting two cliffs with small figures walking across. In Chinese, the word for business, shengyi, has the same character as the word for life, she said softly. Business isn't just about money, it's about people's lives. Dr. Chen smiled proudly. Emma has been studying Chinese calligraphy as well. She has an intuitive grasp of the philosophical underpinnings of the language. Mason watched his executive team's reactions. Some, like Robert and Carolyn, seemed genuinely impressed. Others, particularly Greg, remained skeptical, but were running out of logical objections. Here's what I propose, Mason said, taking control of the meeting again. Tonight's dinner will be a cultural reset, an opportunity to establish a different kind of relationship with the Chinese delegation. Emma will attend with her father and Dr. Chen as cultural guides. Our role will be to listen and learn, not to push our agenda. And if this fails? Greg asked pointedly. Then we're no worse off than we are now, Mason replied. But if it succeeds, we recover a $5 billion deal and establish a new paradigm for international negotiations. Jeffrey Winters, ever practical, turned to Vanessa. What's the proposed structure for tonight's dinner? The garden's private room at 7 p.m., she answered promptly. Traditional Chinese cuisine prepared by Chef Liu, formerly of Beijing's forbidden city restaurant. No business materials, no presentations, no contracts, just conversation and cultural exchange. And tomorrow? Carolyn asked. If tonight goes well, a formal meeting here tomorrow morning, Mason explained. By then, we'll have a better sense of how to proceed. The executive team exchanged glances, a silent communication of reluctant acceptance. Mason had the authority to make this decision with or without their support, but he preferred consensus. I still have reservations, Greg admitted, but I recognize we have limited options. What exactly is my role tonight? To listen more than you speak, Dr. Chen answered with diplomatic directness, and to remember that in Chinese business culture, relationships precede transactions. Emma, who had been watching this exchange, with remarkable patience, suddenly asked, Will Ms. Blackwell be there too? She doesn't like my daddy very much. The innocently perceptive question caused several uncomfortable shifts around the table. Diane, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet throughout the meeting, straightened in her seat. I will be there, Emma, she said carefully. And while your father and I have had professional differences, I respect his work ethic and your remarkable abilities. Emma studied Diane's face with the unfiltered assessment only children can get away with. Okay, she finally said, but you have to promise not to talk about firing people during dinner. It makes everyone sad, and sad people don't make good business partners. A surprised laugh escaped Carolyn, quickly stifled when Diane shot her a warning glance. Mason marveled again at Emma's emotional intelligence. She had just articulated a fundamental truth about negotiation that many executives never grasped. A fair request, Mason agreed. Tonight is about building bridges, not discussing operational adjustments. As the meeting concluded and the executives filed out with varying degrees of resignation and curiosity, Mason noticed David's concerned expression. What's troubling you, David? Sir, I appreciate the opportunity, but I'm worried about Emma. This is a lot of pressure for a child. Dr. Chen placed a reassuring hand on David's shoulder. I've worked with Emma for over a year now. She thrives on challenges that engage her gifts. But, she added, looking at Mason, David's concern is valid. We need clear boundaries to protect her well-being. Agreed, Mason said immediately. Emma's participation will be limited to appropriate cultural guidance. She's not responsible for the success or failure of the negotiations. And either of you can remove her from the situation at any point. No questions asked. Emma, who had been listening to this exchange, tugged at her father's sleeve. Daddy, I want to help. Remember what Mommy always said. Our gifts aren't really ours. They're on loan to help others. David's expression softened at the memory. Sarah would be so proud of you, Em. He turned to Mason with newfound resolve. We're in, Mr. Reynolds, but I'm holding you to those boundaries. I'd expect nothing less, Mason replied, respecting the father's protective instinct. Now let's prepare for tonight. Dr. Chen, could you work with Emma on appropriate cultural protocols? Vanessa will handle the logistical details. As they dispersed to prepare for the evening's critical dinner, Mason felt both hope and trepidation. He was staking his company's future and his own reputation on the wisdom of a child. Yet somehow the risk felt right in a way that conventional business strategies never had. When Vanessa approached with final preparations for the evening, she found Mason standing by the window, lost in thought. Second thoughts? She asked, quietly. Not about Emma, he replied. She's remarkable. I'm wondering why it took a 7-year-old to remind me what business is supposed to be about, building bridges between people, not just balance sheets. Vanessa smiled knowingly. Perhaps that's precisely why we need her perspective. Adults forget the simple truths children still remember. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across Manhattan's skyline, Mason Reynolds prepared to stake everything on a 7-year-old's ability to bridge cultures where seasoned executives had failed. Tonight would either mark the beginning of a new chapter for Reynolds International or the final page of his leadership. Chapter 5. The Decisive Meeting. The Garden restaurant lived up to its name, with lush indoor greenery creating intimate spaces between tables and a central koi pond that reflected the soft lighting. In the private dining room, Mason surveyed the elegant table settings with mounting anxiety. Despite the confidence he had projected to his executive team, doubts crept in as the hour approached. Everything is arranged according to proper feng shui, Dr. Chen assured him, adjusting a flower arrangement slightly. Mr. Zhao will appreciate the attention to detail. Emma stood near the entrance, freshly dressed in a simple but elegant red dress, a color Dr. Chen had explained represented luck and joy in Chinese culture. David, in his first suit in years, hastily purchased that afternoon, looked both proud and uncomfortable. Remember, Dr. Chen instructed the assembled Reynolds executives who were arriving in small groups. Tonight is about relationship building. Business discussions should arise naturally, if at all. Greg Patterson seemed about to object when the restaurant manager appeared at the door. Mr. Reynolds, the Zhao delegation has arrived. A collective tensing rippled through the Reynolds team. This was it. Their last chance to salvage a partnership worth billions. Li Zhao entered first, followed by 5 associates. Their expressions were politely neutral, the practiced mask of experienced negotiators who had already decided to walk away but were fulfilling a social obligation. Mason stepped forward with a practiced smile. Mr. Zhao, thank you for... But, before he could complete his greeting, Emma moved forward and performed a perfect traditional bow. Huanying nin zhao xian sheng, she said in flawless Mandarin. Women hian rongxing neng yu nin de guanglin. Welcome, Mr. Zhao. We are honored by your presence. The transformation in Li Zhao's demeanor was instantaneous. Surprise replaced diplomatic reserve as he replied in Mandarin, clearly testing the child's understanding. Emma responded with the natural fluency of a native speaker, explaining that she had learned his language because she wanted to help people feel welcome when they were far from home. As she spoke, she presented him with a small, carefully wrapped package, a traditional gesture Dr. Chen had suggested. Zhao accepted it with visible appreciation, carefully unwrapping the silk cloth to reveal a hand-painted folding fan depicting The New York and Shanghai skylines connected by a bridge. I painted it myself, Emma explained, still in Mandarin. Dr. Chen helped me with the calligraphy. It says, "Distance is nothing to a bridge well built." The Chinese businessman studied the gift with genuine emotion before addressing Mason in English. "Mr. Reynolds, you did not mention you had such a remarkable cultural ambassador in your company." "Emma is our newest consultant," Mason replied smoothly. "She reminded us of something we had forgotten, that true communication goes beyond words, to understanding." Dinner proceeded with a warmth that had been entirely absent from their previous meetings. Emma acted as an occasional translator, but more importantly, as a bridge between cultural perspectives. When technical terms arose, Dr. Chen assisted, but it was Emma's natural charm and sincere interest in Chinese culture that steadily thawed the atmosphere. Halfway through the meal, Zhao turned to David. "Your daughter is extraordinary, Mr. Thompson. You must be very proud." "I am," David replied simply. "She takes after her mother, who believed deeply in the importance of understanding others." "And where is her mother now?" one of the Chinese associates asked innocently. A brief shadow crossed David's face. "Sarah passed away 3 years ago. Emma has been my strength ever since." The revelation created a moment of shared humanity. Zhao spoke softly in Mandarin to Emma, who nodded with glistening eyes before translating for her father. He says that in Chinese tradition, children who lose a parent young are believed to have special wisdom because they understand the precious nature of life early. He says, "I bring honor to my mother's memory." The genuine connection established in that moment did more for the negotiations than weeks of presentations and financial projections. By dessert, Zhao was discussing the potential partnership with renewed interest, asking questions about Reynolds International's approach to sustainable energy that went beyond their previous conversations. As coffee was served, Zhao addressed Mason directly. "Mr. Reynolds, I must confess we had decided to take our investment elsewhere, but tonight has shown me something unexpected about your company. A willingness to embrace new perspectives and acknowledge past missteps. This speaks well of your leadership." Mason nodded gratefully. "Sometimes we need to be reminded of what truly matters in business. Emma has been an unexpected teacher for all of us." "Indeed." Zhao glanced at the child, who was showing one of his younger associates how to fold a paper crane. "Would it be possible for Emma to join tomorrow's meeting? Her perspective would be valuable." Before Mason could answer, Greg interjected with poorly concealed alarm. "Mr. Zhao, while Emma's cultural insights are certainly appreciated, tomorrow's discussion will involve complex financial and technical details that ultimately serve human needs," Zhao finished firmly. "Your technical expertise is not in question, Mr. Patterson. What has been missing is the human element, the understanding that business agreements are built on trust between people, not just numbers on spreadsheets." Greg fell silent, outmaneuvered by both Zhao's diplomatic firmness and the obvious direction of Mason's preference. "Emma will be there," Mason confirmed, "along with Dr. Chen and Mr. Thompson, of course. We'll reconvene at our offices at 10 tomorrow morning." As the evening concluded, the mood was cautiously optimistic. The Chinese delegation departed with warm handshakes all around, Zhao bowing specially to Emma, who returned the gesture with perfect form. Once they were gone, Greg approached Mason, his expression a mixture of surprise and lingering doubt. "I'll admit the evening went better than expected, but tomorrow is where the real negotiation happens. Are you sure involving—" "The child is wise?" "What I'm sure of," Mason replied, "is that our conventional approach failed spectacularly. Emma's presence has already accomplished more than our entire strategy team." He lowered his voice to ensure David couldn't overhear. "But to address your concerns, we'll have the full technical team ready to handle the details once the relationship groundwork is established." Diane, who had observed the evening with calculating attention, joined them. "The optics are actually quite powerful," she admitted. "There's something compelling about seeing a child bridge these cultural divides. It humanizes the entire process." "This isn't about optics," Mason corrected her. "It's about authentic connection. That's what Emma creates, something we've engineered out of our corporate approach." As the Reynolds team dispersed into the New York night, Mason found himself walking beside David and Emma, who was fighting to keep her eyes open despite her excitement. "You were remarkable tonight, Emma," Mason said gently. "You've given us a second chance we wouldn't have had otherwise." "I just talk to them like they're people," she replied through a yawn. "That's what Mommy always said was the secret to making friends. Treat everyone like they matter, because they do." The simple wisdom silenced both men momentarily. David picked up his drowsy daughter, her head settling naturally on his shoulder. "We should get her home," he said. "Tomorrow will be another big day." Mason nodded, watching as they climbed into the company car he'd arranged. Tomorrow, indeed, would be crucial. The actual negotiations where billions of dollars and hundreds of jobs hung in the balance. Yet somehow, after witnessing Emma's natural diplomacy, he felt more confident than he had in months. Back in his penthouse apartment, Mason found himself unable to sleep. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at the city lights below. For 20 years, he'd built Reynolds International with ruthless efficiency, measuring success in profit margins and market share. When had he forgotten that business was at its heart about people? His phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. "Conference room prepared for tomorrow. Full technical team on standby. Dr. Chen has submitted protocol recommendations." Everything was in place for tomorrow's meeting, yet Mason knew the outcome would depend on something no corporate strategy could control: the genuine human connection that a 7-year-old girl had managed to establish where seasoned executives had failed. Morning arrived with crystal clarity, the kind of perfect autumn day that energized New York City. Mason arrived at the office early, reviewing the revised proposal and ensuring the conference room was arranged according to Dr. Chen's specifications. Circular seating rather than the traditional opposing sides, symbolizing partnership rather than opposition. The Reynolds team gathered first, tension evident beneath their professional exteriors. Emma arrived with David and Dr. Chen, the child noticeably more subdued than the previous evening. "Are you nervous?" Mason asked her quietly. Emma nodded. "A little. But Daddy says being nervous just means you care about doing something right." Mason smiled at the wisdom. "Your daddy is a smart man." At precisely 10 o'clock, the Chinese delegation arrived. Formal introductions gave way to a more relaxed atmosphere as Emma greeted each member by name, remembering personal details from the previous evening's conversations. The gesture wasn't lost on Zhao, whose approving nod to Mason acknowledged the continued cultural sensitivity. As they settled into their seats, Mason opened the meeting with a brief welcome, then did something unprecedented in his career. He yielded the floor entirely to Emma. "Before we discuss business," he explained, "I've asked Emma to share some thoughts on what brings us together today." The executives from both sides shifted in surprise, but no one objected as Emma stood, small but composed in a simple blue dress that matched her father's tie. A deliberate choice, Dr. Chen had explained, symbolizing family unity and sincerity. In Nuiyam, clear Mandarin that Dr. Chen later translated phrase by phrase for the benefit of the Reynolds team, Emma began to speak not about business projections or market analyses, but about bridges. "In school, we learned that the strongest bridges aren't the biggest ones," she said, her voice gaining confidence as she continued. "The strongest bridges bend a little in the wind instead of staying too rigid. They give just enough to stay standing." She described how she had learned Mandarin not for school grades or business advantages, but out of love. Love for the strangers who felt lost in a foreign place, love for the stories and history behind each word and character. "My father taught me that when someone doesn't speak your language, it doesn't mean they have nothing important to say. It means you have to work harder to listen." Emma's simple eloquence held the room spellbound. Even Greg Patterson, the most skeptical of her involvement, watched with grudging respect as she deftly wove together concepts of mutual understanding, patience, and trust, the very elements that had been missing from the previous negotiations. Then came a moment no one had anticipated. Robert Williams, a senior vice president who had remained largely silent until now, suddenly interrupted. "This is absurd," he said sharply. "We're a Fortune 500 company, not a cultural exchange program. We're wasting valuable time with this." Performance when we should be discussing concrete terms. The room froze. Mason half rose from his seat, ready to intervene, but Emma turned toward the interruption with perfect composure. "Excuse me, Mr. Williams," she said in English, her voice small but clear. "In China, they believe it's impolite to interrupt someone when they're speaking from the heart. It's like telling them their feelings don't matter." She paused, meeting his gaze without flinching. "The world is always interrupting little people when they say big truths." The simplicity and power of her response left Williams speechless. Li Zhao's expression shifted from surprise to something approaching admiration. The tension held for one breathless moment before it broke, not with anger or embarrassment, but with Zhao's quiet applause. One by one, others joined in. First the Chinese delegation, then the Reynolds executives, until even Williams managed a reluctant nod of acknowledgement. Emma had turned what could have been a disastrous confrontation into a moment of unexpected unity. As the applause subsided, Zhao spoke directly to Mason. "Mr. Reynolds, your young ambassador has expressed what I have been trying to convey throughout our negotiations. Trust precedes contracts. Understanding precedes agreement. These are not sentimental notions, but practical foundations for lasting partnership." With that single statement, the atmosphere transformed. The meeting proceeded into technical discussions, with Emma occasionally offering cultural context when communication seemed to falter. By noon, the framework of a revised agreement had been established, one that respected Chinese priorities for relationship building while meeting Reynolds International's financial objectives. When the meeting adjourned for lunch, Mason watched as Emma chatted comfortably with members of both delegations, bridging the divide with her natural warmth and curiosity. The transformation was remarkable, from adversarial negotiation to collaborative partnership, catalyzed by a child's straightforward wisdom. David approached Mason, his expression a mixture of pride and wonder. "I never imagined," he began, then shook his head, words failing him. "Neither did I," Mason admitted. "She's changing more than just this deal, David. She's changing how we think about business itself." As the day continued, the partnership that had seemed irretrievably lost took new shape, stronger, more flexible, and more human than before. By late afternoon, when preliminary agreements were signed, Mason knew they had witnessed something rare in corporate America, a negotiation where success was measured not just in dollars, but in genuine human connection. Emma's bridge had been built, now they would all cross it together. Chapter 6. Setbacks and Resistance. The initial elation following the successful negotiation with the Chinese delegation lasted precisely 3 days. On Monday morning, Mason arrived at his office to find an urgent message from the board of directors requesting his immediate presence. The terse wording left little doubt about their mood. "They've caught wind of our unconventional approach," Vanessa explained as they rode the elevator to the top floor. "Robert Williams has been particularly vocal." Mason straightened his tie, preparing for battle. Not surprising, Emma shut him down rather publicly. "It's more than wounded pride," Vanessa cautioned. "He's framed it as a liability issue, claiming we exploited a minor and exposed the company to potential lawsuits." The boardroom fell, silent as Mason entered. 12 faces turned toward him with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Margaret Winters, the board chairwoman, spoke first. "Mason, we've called this meeting to address concerns about the unusual methods employed in securing the Chinese partnership." "You mean our successful methods?" Mason corrected gently. "The deal is back on track, with improved terms for both parties." Robert Williams leaned forward, his jaw tight. "At what cost? Bringing a child into high-stakes negotiations? The potential liability exposure alone has been thoroughly addressed by legal," Mason interrupted. "Emma Thompson participated as a cultural consultant under a properly structured educational agreement with full parental consent and professional oversight." "That's not the point," Williams persisted. "It sets a dangerous precedent. What's next, hiring kindergartners as marketing consultants?" A few nervous chuckles circulated around the table, quickly silenced by Mason's steady gaze. What's next, he said evenly, is recognizing that innovation sometimes requires unconventional approaches. Emma Thompson possesses extraordinary linguistic and cultural abilities that proved invaluable in a critical situation. Margaret tapped her pen thoughtfully. No one disputes the outcome, Mason. The board is simply concerned about the methods, and more importantly, the public perception. Public perception? Mason raised an eyebrow. You mean the universally positive coverage we've received? Perhaps you've seen the Wall Street Journal piece praising our innovative approach to cultural bridge building. He slid several news clippings across the table. Business publications highlighting Reynolds International's creative solution to a cross-cultural impasse. The Chinese business press had been particularly complimentary, with one prominent publication calling it a refreshing departure from Western corporate rigidity. Williams remained unconvinced. Media attention fades, potential lawsuits don't. What happens when this child grows up and decides we exploited her? Or when competitors start claiming we used emotional manipulation in negotiations? That's enough, Robert, Margaret interjected. We're not here to indulge in hypothetical catastrophizing. We're here to understand the situation and ensure proper protocols were followed. She turned to Mason. Walk us through the arrangement with the Thompson family. For the next 30 minutes, Mason detailed the carefully structured agreement created under Dr. Chen's guidance and reviewed by their legal team. Emma's involvement was limited to appropriate cultural consulting, with compensation directed to an educational trust fund. The child's well-being had been paramount throughout, with her father present at all times. As the board's concerns were methodically addressed, Mason sensed the tide turning until Williams played his final card. There's one more issue, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Our investors in Dubai and Saudi Arabia have expressed discomfort with this approach. Cultural sensitivities regarding children in business contexts are different in the Middle East. They're suggesting we present a more professional face moving forward. Mason opened the folder to find messages from several key Middle Eastern investors questioning the wisdom of involving a child in negotiations. The implication was clear. Maintain a traditional corporate image or risk losing significant investment capital. So there it is, Mason said quietly. The real concern isn't legal or ethical, it's financial. It's both, Williams insisted. These investors represent over 30% of our capital structure. Their concerns cannot be dismissed as mere cultural differences. Margaret studied Mason carefully. What do you propose as a solution? A solution implies there's a problem, Mason replied. I see an opportunity to demonstrate that Reynolds International values both innovation and tradition, both youthful perspective and seasoned experience, meaning we continue with our planned international communication initiative, with Emma and Dr. Chen consulting on cultural matters, while establishing clear parameters to address investor concerns. The board deliberated while Mason waited, outwardly calm despite his racing thoughts. Finally, Margaret delivered their verdict. The board recognizes the successful outcome of the Chinese negotiations. However, moving forward, we require a more structured approach. Emma Thompson's involvement must be limited to internal cultural consulting under Dr. Chen's direct supervision. All external negotiations will be conducted by professional staff. Additionally, we expect quarterly reports on this initiative's measurable outcomes. Mason recognized the compromise for what it was. A partial victory that preserved the essence of what he'd started, while imposing boundaries the board could defend to nervous investors. I accept these parameters, he said, with one condition. David Thompson's position remains permanent, with full benefits and a clear path for advancement. Margaret nodded agreement. That was never in question. His status is secured. As the meeting adjourned, Mason felt Williams's cold gaze following. This battle was over, but the war for the company's soul had just begun. Back in his office, Mason found David and Emma waiting with Dr. Chen. The anxiety on David's face made it clear they'd heard about the board meeting. Is everything okay, Mr. Reynolds? Emma asked, her perception as sharp as ever. Mason chose his words carefully. Some grown-ups are still getting used to our new way of doing things, Emma. They've asked that we make some small adjustments to how you help us." Dr. Chen's expression showed she understood the diplomatic phrasing. What adjustments specifically? Mason outlined the board's decision, emphasizing the positives while being honest about the limitations. Emma will continue as our cultural consultant, but primarily for internal education, rather than external negotiations. David's relief was palpable. "To be honest, I've been worried about Emma being in the spotlight too much. She's still just a little girl who needs time to be a kid." Emma, however, frowned thoughtfully. "Is it because Mr. Williams doesn't like me?" "It's because change is hard for large organizations," Mason explained, avoiding the easier lie. "But we're still going to build something important together, just maybe a little slower than we first thought." When Dr. Chen and the Thompsons left, Mason sank into his chair, exhaustion washing over him. The computer chimed with an incoming email, another complication. The Chinese delegation, hearing rumors about the board's intervention, was expressing concern about Reynolds International's commitment to their partnership. Perfect timing. Mason muttered as Diane entered without knocking. "I heard about the board meeting," she said, taking a seat across from him. "Williams is playing a dangerous game. He's protecting his vision of the company," Mason replied. "The same vision I shared until recently. Profit above all. Tradition over innovation." Diane studied him with new interest. "You've changed. Mason, a month ago you would have been leading the charge against your own current position. Perhaps I've remembered something I'd forgotten." He gestured toward the windows overlooking the city. "Behind every spreadsheet cell are real people with real lives. Emma reminded me of that." "Speaking of Emma," Diane shifted uneasily, "there's something you should know. HR received an anonymous complaint about her presence in the workplace, claiming it creates a disruptive and unprofessional atmosphere." Mason's jaw tightened. "Williams?" "Most likely. I've put the complaint on hold, but it's a warning shot. He's not finished fighting this." Before Mason could respond, his phone rang, Vanessa, with yet another crisis. The scheduled press announcement about the Chinese partnership was being questioned by their PR team, who wanted to minimize Emma's role following the board's decision. "It's like swimming against the tide," Mason sighed after hanging up. "That's how change always feels," Diane replied, surprising him with her support. "For what it's worth, I think you're right about this. Emma Thompson has something remarkable to offer, something we desperately need." "Your conversion is unexpected," Mason noted with mild suspicion. Diane smiled ruefully. "Let's just say, watching a 7-year-old demonstrate more emotional intelligence than our entire executive team was illuminating. But make no mistake, the resistance has only begun. Williams has allies throughout the company, and change threatens people." As if confirming her warning, Mason's email chimed again. The Chinese delegation was requesting an urgent call to discuss concerning developments regarding the cultural bridge that made our partnership possible. The rest of the day unfolded in a series of diplomatic firefighting efforts. Mason reassured the Chinese partners, negotiated with the PR department, and fielded concerned calls from other executives. By evening, a fragile compromise had been reached. Emma's role would continue but with modified visibility, and Dr. Chen would take a more prominent position as the initiative's official director. When Mason finally left the office, the autumn evening had turned chilly, reflecting his mood. He decided to walk home, needing time to clear his head. Halfway there, he found himself outside Emma's school, where lights still burned for an evening parent event. On impulse, he entered. The Tao. School hallways bustled with families examining student artwork and science projects. Mason wandered through the displays until he spotted Emma's name on a project titled Bridges Between People. Her colorful illustration showed figures of different colors and sizes holding hands across gaps, with words in multiple languages flowing between them. "She won first place," a voice said behind him. David Thompson stood there, looking more comfortable in casual clothes than he had in his borrowed suit. The judges were impressed by her understanding of cultural communication. "As they should be," Mason replied. "She understands more about human connection than most adults ever learn." David nodded toward a classroom where Emma was eagerly showing something to a group of children and parents. She's teaching them basic Mandarin phrases. The principal asked her to share what she knows after hearing about her work with your company. Watching Emma's animated teaching, her small hands forming the shapes of Chinese characters in the air, Mason felt a renewed certainty about the path he'd chosen. The board has concerns, he admitted to David. Pressure from certain investors, fears about setting precedents. I figured as much, David replied. Corporate politics hasn't changed much since my military days, just different uniforms. We'll navigate it, Mason promised. The initiative is too important to abandon. David's expression grew serious. Mr. Reynolds, I appreciate everything you've done for us, but Emma's well-being comes first. If this becomes too contentious, I understand. Completely, Mason assured him, and I share your priority. This was never about using Emma's abilities. It was about creating a space where those abilities could flourish while helping others. Their conversation was interrupted when Emma spotted them and came running over, excitement radiating from her. Daddy, Mr. Reynolds, my teacher says I can start a language club at lunch. I'm going to teach kids how to say hello in different languages so nobody feels left out on the playground. Her enthusiasm was contagious, momentarily dispelling Mason's concerns about boardroom politics and investor pressure. This was what mattered, creating opportunities for genuine connection in a world determined to erect barriers. That's wonderful, Emma, he said sincerely. You know, no matter what happens with our project at Reynolds International, what you're doing here at school might be even more important. She considered this with surprising seriousness. Dr. Chen says little changes can make big differences over time, like how water can turn a rock into sand if it keeps trying long enough. Dr. Chen is very wise, Mason agreed, and so are you. As he bid them good night and continued his walk home, Mason found his determination solidifying. The resistance from Williams and the board wasn't just about corporate image or investor relations. It was about maintaining a status quo that valued profit over people, transactions over relationships. Emma's simple wisdom offered an alternative. Vision, one where business could serve human connection rather than the reverse. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but watching her teach other children had reminded him why it mattered. Back in his penthouse, Mason poured himself a rare glass of whiskey and stood at the windows overlooking the glittering city. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight he allowed himself to imagine possibilities. A Reynolds International that led by example, demonstrating that empathy and understanding weren't soft luxuries, but essential business assets. His phone buzzed. With a text from Vanessa. Dr. Chen has a proposal. Meeting tomorrow 8 a.m. She says to tell you every resistance creates an opportunity for a stronger bridge. Mason smiled at the message. Perhaps the board's limitations would force them to build something even more meaningful than he'd initially envisioned. With Emma's intuitive understanding, Dr. Chen's expertise and his own corporate influence, they might yet create something revolutionary. A true bridge between worlds that had too long remained separated by misunderstanding and fear. The whiskey burned pleasantly as he raised his glass in a silent toast to an uncertain but promising future. Sometimes the strongest structures were built precisely when the resistance seemed greatest. Chapter 7. The Transformation. Dr. Chen arrived at the 8 a.m. meeting with a thick folder and determination etched across her face. Mason had already consumed 2 cups of coffee, preparing for what promised to be another day of corporate trench warfare. I've been thinking about the board's restrictions, Dr. Chen began without preamble. They've inadvertently given us an opportunity. Mason raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Instead of focusing on Emma's direct involvement in negotiations, we pivot to something more sustainable, a formal cultural communications center within Reynolds International, a place where employees at all levels can develop the skills Emma possesses naturally. She spread several documents across Mason's desk, curriculum outlines, space requirements, staffing projections. By institutionalizing what Emma has shown us, we create something permanent that extends beyond any one person. The board can't object to professional development, that directly impacts the bottom line. Mason studied the proposal with growing interest. You've put considerable thought into this. I've been developing similar programs at Columbia for years, just on a smaller scale. This would be the first corporate application, a potential model for businesses worldwide. The scope of Dr. Chen's vision was impressive. Language training, cultural immersion experiences, regular exchanges with international partners. Emma would still participate as a special consultant, but the focus would shift from her remarkable abilities to the skills everyone could develop with proper guidance. The Chinese delegation would see this as a significant commitment to our partnership, Mason noted, and the board would appreciate the professionalization of what they currently view as an improvised solution. Precisely. We transform a temporary bridge into a permanent structure. Mason made his decision on the spot. Draw up a formal proposal. I'll present it at next week's executive committee meeting. Dr. Chen hesitated. There's one more element I believe is essential. David Thompson should have a leadership role. In the center. As what? He has no formal training in linguistics or international relations. As community outreach director, she replied confidently. His military background gave him extensive cross-cultural experience, and his perspective, as someone who's worked at every level of corporate structures, is invaluable. Plus, his natural dignity and integrity are exactly what we need to balance academic theory with practical application. Mason considered the suggestion. David had shown remarkable poise throughout this unusual situation. Beneath his humble maintenance, uniform lay a man of surprising depth and principle. I'll include it in the proposal, he agreed. Now we just need to navigate the political landmines. Those landmines didn't take long to detonate. By afternoon, Mason learned that Robert Williams had scheduled private meetings with several board members, allegedly expressing concerns about mission drift and resource allocation. The resistance was organizing. Vanessa interrupted his strategic planning with unexpected news. Mason, there's a situation in the lobby. Employees are gathering. It's some kind of demonstration. Security footage showed a growing crowd of Reynolds staff, not just executives but maintenance workers, administrative assistants, security personnel, and mid-level managers, all congregating peacefully in the marble-floored lobby. What are they demonstrating about? Mason asked, bewildered. For Emma Thompson, apparently. Someone leaked news about the board's restrictions on her role, and there's been a spontaneous show of support. Mason hurried to the elevator, arriving in the lobby to find nearly 100 employees holding hand-lettered signs with messages like "Cultural Understanding Matters" and "Support the Thompson Initiative." At the center stood David, looking simultaneously proud and embarrassed by the attention. "I had nothing to do with this," he assured Mason when he approached. "People just started gathering during lunch." Sophia Martinez, a veteran receptionist who had worked at Reynolds since Mason's father's time, stepped forward as an apparent spokesperson. "Mr. Reynolds, we've all seen the difference Emma has made. The Chinese visitors who used to look frustrated now smile when they come in. People are learning phrases in each other's languages. The building feels different. More human," added Jackson from security. "Like we're people first, employees second." Mason was moved by the spontaneous support, but also concerned about the optics of what appeared to be a workplace protest. Before he could respond, the lobby doors opened to admit a surprise visitor, Li Zhao, accompanied by 2 associates. The Chinese businessman surveyed the scene with evident curiosity. "Mr. Reynolds, I came to discuss some final partnership details, but it seems I've arrived at an interesting moment." Mason scrambled to find the right diplomatic response, but Emma, who had apparently arrived with her after-school program's bus, darted through the crowd to greet Zhao in perfect Mandarin. Their animated exchange drew smiles from the gathered employees who seemed to recognize the living proof of their cause. Mason watched as Emma naturally facilitated introductions between Zhao and several staff members, bridging cultural and hierarchical divides with her guileless diplomacy. "This is most illuminating," Zhao commented to Mason. "In China we have a saying, the true character of a house is revealed not by its facade, but by the conversations within its walls. Your employees speak volumes about Reynolds International. Mason seized the moment of opportunity. Mr. Zhao, we're actually developing a more comprehensive approach to cultural communication. Perhaps you'd be interested in hearing about our plans for a dedicated center. Most definitely. Innovation in relationship building is as important as technological advancement. As Mason led Zhao toward the executive elevators, Robert Williams appeared, his expression darkening at the scene before him. Mason, what is the meaning of this disruption? The board will not look kindly on workplace demonstrations. This isn't a demonstration, Robert, Mason replied smoothly. It's a spontaneous expression of company values, precisely the values that secured our partnership with Mr. Zhao's organization. Zhao nodded cordially to Williams, who had no choice but to maintain a professional demeanor in the presence of their important client. The tension between the two executives was palpable as they rode up to the conference room where Dr. Chen waited with her proposal. The next 2 hours transformed Reynolds International's future. Zhao's enthusiasm for the Cultural Communications Center concept exceeded Mason's highest hopes. The Chinese businessman immediately proposed expanded partnership opportunities, joint educational initiatives, exchange programs, collaborative research on cross-cultural business practices. This approach addresses the very barriers that have limited American-Chinese business cooperation for decades, Zhao declared. Reynolds International could become a model for a new kind of global partnership. Even Williams remained largely silent, recognizing that objecting now would directly threaten the newly secured Chinese investment. By meeting's end, preliminary agreements were drafted for the center's development, with Zhao pledging additional resources beyond the original partnership scope. As they finalized details, Zhao made an unexpected request. I would like to meet with your board members tomorrow before my departure. I believe they should understand directly from me the value we place on this initiative. Mason caught Williams's flicker of alarm. A direct endorsement from Zhao would make board opposition to the center politically untenable. I'll arrange it immediately, he promised. When the Chinese delegation departed, Williams finally voiced his objection. This was not the direction we discussed with the board, Mason. You've leveraged Zhao's presence to force a significant new initiative without proper approval. The board wanted us to secure the Chinese partnership, Mason countered. We've done that and created a sustainable framework for future international relationships. The center is simply good business. It's a pet project inspired by a child's naive worldview, Williams snapped, his frustration breaking through. Business isn't about holding hands and sharing cultural stories. It's about competitive advantage and shareholder value. Mason studied the man who had once been his mentor when he'd first joined the company. Brilliant, driven, and utterly convinced of the primacy of profit over people. Had he himself sounded like that just weeks ago? Robert, do you know why my father started this company? Mason asked quietly. Williams frowned at the apparent non sequitur. To commercialize his engineering patents, obviously. That was the mechanism, not the motivation. He started Reynolds International because he believed American ingenuity combined with global collaboration could solve problems neither could address alone. Somewhere along the way, we reduced that vision to quarterly earnings reports. Idealism doesn't keep the lights on, Williams retorted. Neither does short-sighted pragmatism. Look at the results. A partnership worth billions nearly lost because we couldn't see beyond our cultural blinders. Emma Thompson didn't just save a deal. She reminded us of a better way to do business. Their philosophical standoff was interrupted when Vanessa entered with urgent news. The employee gathering had evolved into something more organized. A petition signed by over 200 staff members expressing support for the Cultural Communication Initiative and specifically requesting that both David and Emma Thompson remain involved. It's gone viral within the company, Vanessa explained. Even senior managers are signing it. Mason couldn't suppress a smile at the organic momentum building behind the vision. It seems the company has made its position clear. Robert, The question is, will you continue fighting this or help us build it properly? Williams's expression revealed his internal conflict, a career-long commitment to traditional corporate values, battling against undeniable evidence of changing times. "I'll reserve judgment until after Zhao meets with the board," he said finally. "But don't mistake my caution for surrender." The board meeting the following morning exceeded even Mason's expectations. Li Zhu delivered a masterful presentation on the competitive advantages of cultural fluency in global markets, citing Reynolds' emerging center as a pioneering approach that his consortium was eager to support. The financial projections were compelling: expanded partnerships across Asia, preferred vendor status for Reynolds technology, and joint research initiatives worth potentially billions over the next decade. Margaret Winters, ever the pragmatic chairwoman, summarized the board's position after Zhao departed. While the genesis of this initiative was unconventional, its business case appears sound. The board approves the Cultural Communication Center's development with quarterly performance reviews and appropriate oversight. Williams remained stone-faced but offered no further objection. The tide had turned decisively. With formal approval secured, the real work began. Over the next 3 months, Reynolds International transformed an entire floor of their headquarters into the Center for Cultural Communication. Dr. Chen resigned her university position to become its first director, with David Thompson serving as Community Outreach Coordinator. Emma's role was carefully structured as a special consultant through an educational partnership with her school, allowing her to contribute while maintaining appropriate boundaries for a child her age. The center quickly became more than Mason had envisioned. Beyond language training and protocol guidelines, it evolved into a vibrant hub where employees from all levels mixed with international partners, learning not just how to communicate across cultures, but how to build genuine relationships. Maintenance staff taught executives conversational Spanish, while marketing managers practiced Mandarin with visiting Chinese engineers. The hierarchical walls that had defined corporate culture began to dissolve in the face of shared learning. 6. Months after the center's inauguration, Reynolds International hosted a formal celebration. The lobby, once the site of spontaneous employee gathering, was transformed with decorations representing the dozen countries where Reynolds now had strengthened partnerships. At the center of it all stood a simple plaque dedicating the main conference room as the Sarah Thompson Room, honoring Emma's mother, whose wisdom about understanding others lived on through her daughter. Mason watched as Emma, now 8 years old, confidently guided guests through the center, switching effortlessly between languages as she introduced people to one another. Her father stood nearby, his maintenance uniform replaced by a suit that now looked natural on him, his easy dignity a perfect complement to Dr. Chen's academic expertise. "Quite a transformation," Diane Blackwell commented, joining Mason by the refreshment table. "Both for the company and for you." "The company was easier," Mason admitted with a smile. "I had more resistance to change than our organizational structure did." "And Williams?" Mason glanced across the room where Robert Williams was engaged in surprisingly animated conversation with one of Zhao's associates. "Still evolving. He's been attending Mandarin classes twice weekly. Says it's just for business reasons, but I caught him teaching his granddaughter Chinese characters last week when she visited his office." Their conversation was interrupted when Li Zhao approached, accompanied by a distinguished older gentleman Mason didn't recognize. "Mr. Reynolds, may I present Minister Chen from our Commerce Department. He has been following our partnership with great interest." The introduction led to a productive discussion about expanding Reynolds' sustainable energy projects across multiple Chinese provinces, an opportunity that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. As the evening progressed, Mason found a quiet moment to speak with Emma, who was taking a break from her ambassadorial duties. "Are you enjoying your work with the center?" he asked. She nodded enthusiastically. "It's the best job ever. I get to help grown-ups remember how to make friends." The simplicity of her description made Mason laugh. "That's exactly what you do, and what this company needed most." Emma's expression grew momentarily serious. Dr. Chen says we're building a living bridge, not just between countries, but between people's hearts. That's what Mommy would have wanted. Your mother would be incredibly proud of you, Emma. We all are. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. A group of visiting Japanese executives had arrived early for next week's negotiations. Looking momentarily disoriented in the crowded lobby, their discomfort was visible until Emma approached them with a perfect traditional greeting in Japanese. Mason watched as tension melted into smiles of appreciation. The scene perfectly encapsulated everything the center represented, the simple human connection that transcended corporate structures and cultural differences. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Mason found himself standing with David Thompson near the memorial plaque for Sarah. "I never properly thanked you," Mason said quietly. David looked puzzled. "For what? You're the one who saved my job and created all this. For reminding me what matters. Your daughter showed me that business without humanity is just numbers on a page. You showed me that dignity doesn't come from titles or corner offices." David considered this, then offered his hand. "Sarah used to say that the most important bridges are invisible. They're the connections between people that can't be seen, only felt." As they shook hands, Mason felt the truth of those words. The most valuable transformation hadn't been to the company's structure or even its culture, but to the way people within its walls saw one another, not as functions or titles, but as human beings with gifts to share. 1 year to the day after Emma had first greeted Li Jiao in perfect Mandarin, Reynolds International was featured in Harvard Business Review as a case study in innovative corporate culture. The article highlighted how a chance encounter with a multilingual child had catalyzed a fundamental rethinking of how business relationships were built. The Center for Cultural Communication became a model studied by corporations worldwide. Emma, now 9, occasionally gave presentations to visiting executives about her experiences, always emphasizing the same simple truth. Understanding isn't just about words. It's about really seeing other people. On a crisp autumn afternoon, much like the one when their paths had first crossed, Mason sat with Emma and David in the Sarah Thompson room, watching as construction began on a new wing of the center, an educational space where children from around the world would come to learn the art of bridge building across cultures. "Did you ever imagine this would happen?" Mason asked David. "When you were mopping floors and worrying about being fired?" David shook his head, watching his daughter who was sketching designs for the children's area. "Never. But Sarah always said Emma would change the world someday. I just didn't expect it to start so soon." Emma looked up from her drawing, catching the end of their conversation. "I didn't change the world," she corrected matter-of-factly. "I just helped people listen to each other. The rest happened by itself." Mason smiled at her characteristic modesty. Perhaps that was the most important lesson of all, that the greatest transformations often began with the simplest acts of understanding. A child had built a bridge with words of welcome, and an entire company had found the